Hey, my name is James Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to talk about, is buy-to-let dead? You see, if you watch any of my videos, the market looks really tough at the moment. Every single week, we have bad news for landlords. We're talking about the Renters' Rights Bill. We're talking about interest rates going up. We're talking about EPCs and having to spend £15,000 per property. But some people are still making money. But if you look at the comments, the existing landlords that watch this channel, thousands and thousands of them are looking to leave the market. So in this video, I want to address the elephant in the room. I'm a buy-to-let investor. Am I leaving the market? And what can you do to make sure that you could still make money in property? Now, before we jump into this, if you're new around here and you haven't done already, do make sure you subscribe to the channel over there and hit that bell notification. We're on the way to 46,000 subscribers. And by subscribing, you'll get all these updates that you need. We talk about the Renters' Rights Bill. We talk about house prices, interest rates. We talk about property investing news and much, much more. So do subscribe over there. And let's get some views on this video. How do we do that? Simple. Smash like, tickle like, do something to that like button. That helps with the YouTube algorithm. And that really does help the channel grow. So thanks to everyone that does that. So, buy-to-let. Now, if I ask the existing landlords in the comments if they're staying in the market, go ahead. If you are an existing landlord, then there's a good chance that you're considering leaving, or maybe you are leaving already. And I don't blame you if that's the decision that you've ultimately made. I've been investing in property since 1999. I bought my first studio flat just down the road here in Dorking in Surrey. And I lived in that property for a number of years before turning it into a one-bedroom flat. It's now rented out as a one-bedroom flat. We've increased the value on it by doing that. And then ultimately I decided to get more property. And so I worked as a recruitment consultant doing IT recruitment. And I was around in 98, 99, 2000, 2001. And during those times, I missed the opportunity to make really good money there. You see, there was a bug that you may recall called the Y2K bug. And companies would pay contractors thousands of pounds, genuinely thousands of pounds per day. Like Hewlett-Packard I'm talking about. I had contracts with Hewlett-Packard, GlaxoSmithKline, and they were paying some people £1,500 a day to work on Y2K stuff because there wasn't enough contractors. And it turns out it was all a load of rubbish. I don't know if you remember, they were saying cash machines were going to spit out money. Your computer was just going to turn off. But it didn't. But big companies couldn't take that risk. Now, the people that worked there earlier, a little earlier than me, 96, 97, they made a fortune placing people because they were making really, really good commission. By the time I got there, the people were already placed. And so I was just maintaining stuff, which you don't get such a good commission on. However, I was surrounded by people that had made a lot of money, and a lot of them were doing various different things to make more money. So I would go to lunch with someone and they'd say, go and buy some stocks and shares. And we worked with some companies then that were quite big. We had Telewest, that was a company that we worked with. So I invested in some Telewest shares. Ultimately, they went bust and became Virgin Media. Lucent Technologies, that went bust or didn't do very well. Weatherspoons was something that I invested in, and stocks and shares didn't really do very well. And then I met some people as well there that were saying, go and invest in Hastings. And I went down with a friend and we did some viewings of properties in Hastings, and it was the same story in every agent. They said the mainline train is coming to London and it's going to mean all the house prices are going to go booming once that happens. And Brighton University is going to expand there. It's like they all had the same story for people like me that came from the London area, which they probably did. And so I did invest in Hastings. And ultimately, that did work out quite well for me because it's about being in the market for a period of time, not timing the market like some people are trying to do right now. Some people are saying, well, house prices are going to crash. I'm going to buy when that happens. Very hard to predict when ultimately the market, if it does even go down, will bottom out. But if you buy and hold, ultimately property does very well for you. But buy-to-let is hard at the moment. It is definitely harder at the moment. So would I buy a buy-to-let property in the south of England? Probably not. I wouldn't buy a property in the south of England, just a vanilla buy-to-let property, because I think the interest rates are quite high. While the rents are going up, you've got to take into account that you need to make a decent margin in order to be able to do the EPC stuff and all the other stuff. However, where does buy-to-let work? It does work in the north still. So if you want to invest, you can buy good properties for 60 grand. They're not going to be like Buckingham Palace, but you can buy a property for 60 grand that might need a lick of paint in somewhere like Doncaster, Scunthorpe, Sheffield. If you don't believe me, just look on the Rightmove site. You can see many properties at that level that could be turned into a nice little buy-to-let without spending lots of money. Rents are quite good up there. So we bought a property at auction for 60 grand. We did do it up and now it's worth 100 grand and we're getting 675 rent on that. And that's going up to £700 a month soon. So the north of England, buy-to-lets is something you could consider and would do quite well. But there are better strategies than that. And those are the ones I want to talk about here. Firstly is HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. This is a strategy that gets you really good cash flow. So what I'm talking about here is that you buy, for example, a 3-bedroom house that has 2 reception rooms. So a reception room would be a living room and a dining room. There are plenty of 3-bedroom houses in certain areas, ex-council houses that you can buy, that you can get that type of property. And then rather than renting it out as a 1 unit, let's just say in this argument that you'd get £1,000 if you rented it out as 1 complete unit. But if you rented it out on a room by room basis, you would get £500. That means you now get 2.5 grand, but there are extra costs involved in that. So you would need to pay for the electric, the gas, and things like the broadband and stuff like that. But that's not going to be prohibitively expensive. And so HMOs are a high cash flow strategy. They work very well in most areas. Where I'm based in Dorking in Surrey, there aren't lots of HMOs, but the people that have got them are making very, very good money. Down the road from me in Crawley, which is by Gatwick Airport, there are tons of them. And they're also doing very well because there's lots of flight stewardesses and people that work at the airport that are on lower incomes that want that type of property. So HMOs is a great strategy. Next one is serviced accommodation. Now, I want to caveat that. So, in certain areas, this isn't great. So, in Cornwall and Devon, this was brilliant for ages. But the councils are clamping down on it down there. They don't want this type of stuff happening. In fact, they'll charge you double the amount of council tax if you have a second home in those types of areas. So where you can do well with serviced accommodation is random different towns that don't seem particularly busy for tourism. So one of my best friends, he has serviced accommodation in Dorking. So down by Dorking Football Club, he has a 3-bedroom house that he was renting out for £1,500 a couple of years ago. It would be more than that now, but it was £1,500. And now he's renting it out on Airbnb, and he is getting so many bookings on there, and it's really hard to get. In fact, this week I was WhatsApping him because one of my best mates is coming over from Canada in April, and it's full the week in April that we wanted to get it. So that's how busy he is, because he's in a town that's not oversaturated with Airbnbs. Now, if you did this in Brighton, if you did this in Bognor, or you did it in a seaside place, there's going to be tons of Airbnbs, and so the price gets driven down significantly. When I went to France a few weeks ago, or a week or so ago, depending on when you're watching this, we used Airbnbs. So when we're traveling down to the big house that we stayed in for a couple of weeks, we don't know how far we can drive in a day without Amelie, my 4-year-old girl, getting frustrated and wanting to get out of the car. So we drive as much as we can, and we stop and do things along the way. So it's not in the car all day. We'll stop and go to a park for lunch and do whatever we can to entertain her on the way. But ultimately, we'll get to a point where she says, look, I've had enough. And so we then look on Airbnb, we see what's around, and we use Airbnb because in that scenario, we want at least one bedroom. So there's a living room that we can sit and watch TV or look on our laptops or just relax while Amelie's sleeping in the bedroom, or ideally 2 bedrooms. And some of the places where we went in France, the last place on the last day was rubbish, but it was £200 a night because there was no hotels in the area. And that was exactly what I'm saying. They picked an area where it wasn't oversaturated. And so Airbnb service accommodation is a great way to also make money. So I've got some more strategies, but before I jump into those, I do want to say that if you want to understand property investing and what works in property investing and what doesn't, buy-to-let is tough. You need to do one of these strategies. And we've got a course called The Fundamentals of Property Investing. It's peanuts. Like, it's genuinely peanuts. It's less than £30, one-time cost. And we go through all of these strategies, how to find properties below market value, how to add value to those properties, and much, much more. So in the description and in the first comment, do grab a copy of The Fundamentals of Property Investing while you're here. It's less than 30 quid. More than 2,000 people have bought a copy of that since watching this channel. So you definitely get your money's worth out of that. Next is something called Lease Options. Now, these are something that are coming good again. So a lease option is where you'll buy a property and you'll agree a price. So let's just say right now there are people that have got their houses listed for 200 grand for sale, but the market isn't willing to pay £200,000 at the moment. But the seller wants £200,000, but the market price everywhere else is 180. So what you can say is that I'll give you the £200,000, but I need the market to recover. I need that to happen. And so you secure the deal with £1. You give them £1, you do a legal contract, it goes through a solicitor, they have a solicitor, you have a solicitor. There's nothing untoward. This is how a lot of businesses are bought, football clubs and stuff like that. And then when the contract matures, and the length of time of that can be however long you decide, normally 5 years or 7 years, you're banking on the fact that the market increased in that time. And maybe the house is now worth 250, but you've agreed to buy it for 200. And that gives you some instant equity. Now, during that time, that 5, 7, 8 year period of time, you're in charge of the maintenance. You're the one getting paid the rent, but you also might pay them a reduced rent. So they're also making some income during that time, but they're not having any maintenance issues or any of the legal problems. And you ultimately build equity in that time and grab that. That's a very good strategy that we cover in the fundamentals of property investing as well. It wouldn't work in a busy market. So it hasn't worked for a couple of years because the market was so red hot. People didn't need that. But now properties are sitting on the market for a lot of time. So some people just want to get rid of the liability and they'll consider that. So lease options is a good one. And my favorite strategy, the one that's made me the most money, is the BRRR strategy. And that stands for buy, refurbish, refinance, rent. So we bought the house in Doncaster for £60,000 at auction. We refurbished that property. We spent 15 grand on the auction fees, refurbing it. It wasn't as much as you would think. We were £75,000 in for that deal. We then refinanced that property, and that one stacked up perfectly. Not often that will happen, but it stacked up that the valuation was 100 grand. Now, if you know buy-to-let, they'll lend you 75% loan to value, meaning we got 75 grand mortgage on it. We paid for the property in cash. We did all the refurb in cash. You could do it on a bridging loan or borrow money. There's ways to do that. And then we got 75 grand back. Now, of course, we didn't get all of that back. There were solicitors' fees and other costs of doing business, but we got most of our money back from that deal, meaning we only had a smidge of money, a few grand left in the deal at the end. We then rented the property out. We did it in Dorking in Surrey last summer, documented it on this channel, bought a flat for 120 grand. I spent 6 grand doing it up. A few months later, it was worth 170. That is a great strategy to bank some equity, and that we cover in the fundamentals of property investing. Buy below market value, update the property at an affordable cost, not unrealistic, and then refinancing and building some equity and making money. Now, these strategies do work regardless of what happens in the market. Standard buy to let, I agree, it's tough. And all of this should be done in a limited company to reduce your tax burden, which we'll also talk about that. So do grab a copy of that. It's less than 30 quid, as I said. You'll love it and you'll get some great value. There's more than 100 videos in that. Do smash like and subscribe. Also check out all the other content as well on the channel, including this video right here.